I'd now like to welcome our next speaker, the Honourable David Clarke, who is a member of the Legislative Council and the Parliamentary Secretary for Justice, which is why we're all here today. Mr Clarke has again been another supporter and long-term supporter of the Coptic community and has always advocated on our behalf on this issue, and he always delivers very passionate speeches, so we're very much looking forward to hearing him speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And today here in Sydney, Christians are going to their church services as they do on a Sunday. It's another day of peace here in Sydney, Australia's biggest city. But last Sunday in Cairo, the biggest city in Egypt, it wasn't a day of peace. It was a day of violence and a day of murder, murder of Coptic Christians by Islamic fundamentalists. That's what it was last Sunday in Cairo. And virtually every day is like that. It happens day in and day out, and year in and year out, and decade after decade. 7 days ago, the great Coptic cathedral in Cairo was invaded by fundamentalists. They threw Molotov cocktails, they fired guns, they murdered Christians, and the police were there in force. They were there in force, and they joined with these murderers. They released tear gas against those Coptic Christians in this holy sanctuary of the Copts in Cairo. And friends,
we want justice! 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 We want justice!
and indeed we say to President Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood government of Egypt, all of us are saying we want justice for the Copts of Egypt. 9 days ago, 2 days before the invasion of the cathedral in Cairo, a prominent imam got up and he exhorted the people to go out and to kill Christians and to expel the infidels. And the mob did precisely that. They killed 6 Christians on that day, and they murdered a Muslim for good measure who was trying to help the Christians. That's what's happening in present-day Egypt. President Morsi says that he will protect the Christians, but he doesn't protect the Christians. He protects the Muslim Brotherhood, he protects the Salafists, but he doesn't protect the Christians. Year in and year out, Coptic girls are kidnapped and forced to convert to Islam. Coptic businesses are burnt to the ground. Christian churches are destroyed. Coptic history is airbrushed from the school books in Egypt. When crimes are committed against Copts, the perpetrators are put into sham conciliation conferences and the perpetrators go free. We know what they're going through because a few months ago here in Sydney, we experienced some of this. You remember a few months ago, we had some of these Islamist thugs rampaging through the streets of Sydney. Do you remember that day? They abused Sydney shoppers here in this very city, only metres away from here. They abused Sydney shoppers. They attacked our police. They overturned police cars. They were doing all of these things. They called for the beheading of those that they believed were against them. They called for the beheading. Can you believe that? Here in Sydney. But on that day, these Islamist thugs did not take control of the streets of Sydney as they have in Cairo. Those Islamist thugs will never take control of the streets in Sydney or in Australia for that matter. Those Islamist thugs were brought to justice. The police protected the people of Sydney. The police safeguarded the safety of our citizens. Those thugs were brought to justice, and the courts meted out justice to them. And that's the way that it is here in Australia. We believe in justice. And today we call for justice in Egypt for the Copts. That's what we call for. We call on President Morsi to protect the Christians of Egypt. We call on the federal government to speak out even more strongly for their protection. We call for sanctuary and for refuge for those Copts who, if they are not given refuge, will suffer death. Have no mistake about that. Today we say no more injustice to the Copts. Today we say no more killing of the Copts. Today we say no more Coptic blood.